Governments spend billions every year fighting drugs, arresting dealers, running anti-drug campaigns, telling you to just say no. These are the same governments that secretly drugged their own citizens, soldiers, and prisoners. Not by accident, not in secret rogue operations. As deliberate, documented government policy. 6 times governments used drugs as a weapon against their own people. MKUltra. The CIA secretly dosed thousands of Americans with LSD for 20 years. In 1953, the CIA launched a classified program called MKUltra. The goal was simple: find a drug that could control the human mind. They believed the Soviet Union was already ahead in mind control research. They were terrified of falling behind. LSD had just been discovered. The CIA thought it might be the key. They began testing it on everyone they could. Mental patients in hospitals, prisoners who were not told what they were being given, soldiers on military bases, and ordinary citizens. The CIA set up fake brothels in San Francisco where agents dosed unsuspecting men through their drinks and watched through one-way mirrors. One subject, a U.S. Army scientist named Frank Olson, was dosed without his knowledge during a work retreat. 9 days later, he was found dead on a New York sidewalk, having fallen from a hotel room 13 stories up. The CIA called it suicide. His family called it murder. In 1994, his body was exhumed. Evidence of a skull fracture suggested he was knocked unconscious before the fall. MKUltra ran for 20 years. When it was finally exposed in 1977, the CIA admitted it had destroyed most of the files. No one was prosecuted. The program simply ended. Nazi meth. Germany gave its entire military methamphetamine and nearly conquered Europe. In 1938, a German pharmaceutical company released a product called Pervitin. It was methamphetamine in pill form, sold over the counter. It became enormously popular. Housewives took it to clean faster, students took it to study, soldiers requested it. When Hitler invaded France in 1940, the German military issued Pervitin to the entire army. Soldiers marched for days without sleeping. They moved faster and hit harder than anything the Allied forces expected. France fell in 6 weeks. Military historians now believe the speed and aggression of the attack was fueled in part by the methamphetamine. The German military distributed an estimated 200 million Pervitin pills between 1939 and 1945. By the end of the war, soldiers and officers at every level were addicted. Hitler himself was receiving daily injections of methamphetamine from his personal doctor. Pervitin was quietly removed from German pharmacies after the war, but methamphetamine never disappeared. Prohibition poisoning. The U.S. government deliberately added poison to alcohol and killed 10,000 of its own citizens. In 1920, the U.S. banned alcohol, but people kept drinking. They just drank illegally made spirits instead. The government had a problem. Industrial alcohol was everywhere, used in factories and manufacturing, and bootleggers were stealing it to drink. So in 1926, the U.S. government ordered manufacturers to add poison to all industrial alcohol: methanol, kerosene, chloroform, acetone. They knew people would drink it anyway. That was the point. They hoped the poisonings would scare people into stopping. It did not work. People kept drinking. They just died more. By 1933, when Prohibition ended, the government's poisoning program had killed an estimated 10,000 Americans. The policy was publicly defended at the time. One senior government official said people who chose to break the law, quote, suffered the consequences. British LSD soldiers. The UK military secretly dosed its own troops and filmed what happened. In 1964, the British military conducted a secret experiment at Porton Down, the UK's chemical warfare facility. Soldiers were told they were participating in a test of a new nerve agent antidote. They were actually given LSD. The military filmed everything that happened next. Soldiers climbed trees and refused to come down. One radio man reported that he was unable to give a radio location because he was laughing too hard. An officer sent to assess the situation reported that his men were now in a complete state of disorganization. Half were collapsed, half were dancing. The footage was declassified in 2005. You can still watch it online today. The soldiers were never told what they had been given. The UK government did not officially acknowledge the experiment for decades. Agent Orange. The U.S. military sprayed 20 million gallons of toxic chemicals on its own soldiers for 9 years. Between 1961 and 1971, The U.S. military ran a program called Operation Ranch Hand in Vietnam. The goal was to destroy jungle cover and crops so the enemy could not hide or eat. They used a mixture of herbicides, the most famous of which was called Agent Orange. It contained dioxin, one of the most toxic compounds ever created. They sprayed it from planes, over jungles, villages, and their own troops on the ground below. Soldiers came home and developed cancers, nerve disorders, and rare diseases at rates that made no sense. Their children were born with birth defects. Entire veteran communities in the U.S. started reporting the same symptoms. The U.S. government denied any connection for over a decade. Veterans sued, courts ruled in their favor, the government paid out billions. Over 3 million Vietnamese civilians and soldiers were also exposed. The effects are still being felt in Vietnam today. The Soviet Union, the government that turned psychiatry into a drug-based torture machine. In the 1960s, the Soviet government had a problem. Citizens were publicly criticizing the state. They could not simply shoot everyone. A psychiatrist named Andrei Snezhnevsky created a diagnosis called sluggish schizophrenia. It was defined as schizophrenia with no visible symptoms. Anyone who opposed the Soviet government could be diagnosed. The logic was circular. If you criticized the state, you must be insane. Dissidents were committed to psychiatric hospitals called psichushkas. Then came the drugs. Sulfazine was injected to cause agonizing fever and pain. Haloperidol was given in massive doses to destroy concentration and will. Patients who entered as healthy, clear-minded dissidents emerged months later as shuffling, disoriented shells. The World Psychiatric Association condemned the practice in 1983. The Soviet Union withdrew from the organization rather than face investigation. Sluggish schizophrenia was never adopted outside the Soviet Union. It disappeared from official use when the USSR collapsed in 1991. 6 governments, 6 programs, all of them officially denied until documents proved otherwise. Every single program was run by officials who believed the ends justified the means. Every single one was eventually exposed, and almost no one faced consequences. If you want to see more stories like this, subscribe.